Minerva Perez is one of the most impactful, truly impactful community activists on the East End. I've learned so much from her. I'm humbled by her presence because she has done things in a way that I think are the most admirable and the most functional that you possibly can. She's someone who's been working with the Latino community for years after having had a very substantial tenure at the retreat as well, working with domestic violence victims. Minerva has a way, however, of recognizing people's worth and commitment and making people work together. I remember, if you don't mind me saying, Minerva, that there was a moment when you were telling me about how you were approaching all of the police departments in the towns and villages here on the East End, and I thought, that's the thing to emulate. You know, they want to protect us. They might be scared of somebody, but there's a lot of goodwill, sometimes misled, now misinformed, everywhere. And to tap into that is the thing I've never forgotten you saying that. It just like changed my life. Plus watching all the other incredible good that you've done. So thank you so much for being here. And we're all going to learn what those little things are on our chairs eventually, I'm sure. We'll do a quick little intro and then you're going to learn all about those little things. I've had some questions. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. Please welcome Minerva Perez.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, and thank you for coming out on this cold night. Thank you to the church and to everyone for setting this up and helping to give. I mean, I'm here mainly to speak about the work that I'm doing with OLA. I know there was a fun kind of lead-in on the website about this work and that work, but if y'all are okay, I'll give that like 30 seconds and then go into the work with OLA, if that's okay. Coming out to the East End was just about a little bit over 20 years ago, and I came out here in circumstances that it was beautiful, but I didn't know anyone out here. And this really became a community for me that meant so much to me. I moved my grandma, my mom, to live out here from Florida, and my mom being mentally ill, my grandmother suffering from 3 kinds of cancer, and I just had community members from all different backgrounds, from the arts, from theater, the Latino community, Bonnickers, you know, everyone come out and just support my family and really love them. And I say that because oftentimes I feel that people look at me kind of like, well, why do you care? Like, is it real? Like, what do you care? Like, you didn't grow up here. You're not 7th generation Sag Harbor. You didn't grow up in a household where only Spanish was spoken. You didn't like all these different things. It's like, I'm here because I love this community and this work means so much to me because I know how beautiful this place is, from the soul all the way out. And I will do anything to make sure that we can support and protect and uplift and celebrate our community, and that we can connect people to that, and that we can be here to listen to each other, to have very difficult dialogues. But it just means so much to me, this place, and I'm here for it. So it's real. I will play this short. I made it a little bit shorter, but just for some folks that maybe don't know, and it gives us a little bit of an update on some things. So I'll play this real quick and we'll jump right into everything, all right? Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge Erica Vargas and Erica Padilla, who are members of our team at OLA, who are some of the people on our team of 22 people right now. We have 22 folks at OLA. Yes. And we need every last one of them, and the work they do is just tremendous. So thank you for being here tonight, and you'll learn more about their work as well. So without further ado, I'm going to press this button. Thank you. Hello, my name is Minerva Perez, and I am the Executive Director of OLA of Eastern Long Island. Listening to and honoring Latino community members for the last 21 years has driven the growth and direction of OLA. Through advocating, educating, and building community, we have developed trust, bridged gaps in critical services, and set the course for policy change. Still, we have a challenging road ahead. Hate, fear, and unjust practices threaten the fabric of our community. Our civil rights team tackles community needs presented to us daily by the OLA crisis team. These needs include illegal evictions, the lack of services for special needs children, victim support, and flawed practices related to child sexual assault. Our Immigration Legal Services team, led by Director of Immigration Legal Services, immigration lawyer Lucia Demoral, provides free consultations, immigration clinics, and pro bono direct representation to our most vulnerable community members.
My name is Lucia Demoral. I'm the Director of Immigration Legal Services at OLA. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my experience and the reason why I chose this career path. When I was 14 years old, my twin sister and I immigrated to the United States from Guatemala, and the process had such a profound effect on us that we both ended up being immigration attorneys. For me, the work that OLA does in the community is very personal. I see how they're changing lives, how they're helping advocate for Latino families that are in need, and just the passion that they put in the work. So it's an honor to work for OLA, and I'm really excited to continue just assisting more families in the East End. I invite you to check us out, to check out our mission. It's very important to support OLA. As you may know, we don't have that many legal services providers that offer quality representation, quality advocacy in the East End. So that's why OLA services are crucial to the Latino community and the immigrant community.
We are the only nonprofit in our region offering these services and doing it entirely with no cost to the community member. The immigration team also educates elected officials and local institutions on practices that put community members at greater risk. Our adolescent mental health care team, Youth Connect, uses bilingual and multicultural approaches to support teens and their caregivers, one workshop and one text at a time.
Youth Connect has brought to the community something unique, a 7-day-a-week bilingual helpline for teens and preteens. It's free, anonymous, and confidential. Teens and preteens can reach out to us when times are tough. Because it's anonymous, they can express themselves freely. They can express what they need, how they feel, and we are here to listen. Teens are feeling more isolated than ever. We know this because they tell us. And we listen without judgment, and we let them know that they are not alone.
We offer our free workshops to all 24 school districts across our region. Since launching Youth Connect, we have engaged with over 2,500 youth across 35 workshops. Our text phone line is answered 7 days a week in Spanish or English.
Our middle school and high school presentations on mental health and substance abuse are done in the classroom to establish the best connection possible with the students. Never assembly style or a lecture. We present in both English and Spanish. We keep these workshops interactive, engaging, and informative. We are creating trust and proving that we are ready to listen and support the students the way they need most. And we always bring the best snacks.
That's right.
We know that our commitment to developing youth leadership and strengthening community engagement is the only path forward to deep and lasting change on the East End of Long Island. We continue to grow our Healthy East End initiatives, connecting community members to healthcare, medical transportation, health insurance, disability services, and more. We have awarded over 16 youth scholarships that allow local youth the opportunity to make their career and academic dreams come true. With all we have on our OLA plate, we have chosen to grow our cultural offerings as the main way our community can be celebrated. The rich and flourishing Latino music, dance, art, and film scene at a local and international level inspires us to grow our own programs and shows for all to share together, regardless of language or country of origin. OLA's passionate and driven team has made a promise to our region. Thank you for all you do to help us keep that promise. Together, we are building a safer, healthier, and more equitable region for our shared community. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. couple of quick updates that happened even since then is now we're up to 21 scholarships that we've given out. And that is really, has a lot to do with the generosity of one couple. And these are multi-year scholarships, so they could be about $18,000 per child. We just gave 6 out in Riverhead students. What's exciting about as OLA grows, and as members of our community that are Latino, successful business owners, people that have been here for generations, doing well, we now have someone who stepped up and they want to help us double that fund by reaching out to Latino business owners and amassing double the fund so that we can start showing that kind of connection. It's beautiful to see the growth. Unfortunately, a lot of the growth has happened with OLA as a result. I started in 2016 in February. I had been volunteering a bit for OLA back in 2006. And then I stepped away and joined the retreat and ran the domestic violence shelter there for about 6 years, which I loved. And then at a certain point, I thought, okay, I'd like to go back to OLA. And it was February 2016. And never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would have November 2016. So everything changed. The world kind of went on its head. And I had been living out here long enough to feel that I love this community dearly. I felt very connected at so many levels. And I also was not prepared. I was not prepared for sort of the insidious nature of hate and misinformation funneling into the fabric of this beautiful space. And not with certain people, you know. The insidious thing about hate and misinformation, it just settles over you like a dust, like acid rain. And it was having an impact on some of the very local policies. So it wasn't just about looking back at what was happening in Washington or at the border, and of course those were horrendous, but it was what was happening right here and what we weren't prepared for. And what I believe that we've been doing as we grow our organization, we are not growing our organization willy-nilly. Everything that we've grown, the work with mental health came as a direct result of starting mental health for family workshops at CME and finding out that 6-year-olds during that time were touching their parents every 2 hours when they were sleeping to make sure that they were not taken from their beds. At that moment, with a 6-year-old doing that, we knew that we had to make sure that there was something that we were doing with mental health. It wasn't about COVID. So we started building, tracking, surveys, all kinds of stuff. And then finally we were able to get involved in mental health work through Office of Mental Health and Project Hope and really provide some support for the entire East End with all different backgrounds, Portuguese, English, Spanish, African American, Shinnecock, white. We hired 32 people in a month. And we were serving those needs within OLA, which was a lot, but we thought we should do it, we have to do it. We stepped into the health space. We stepped into making sure that testing and information was at least available to folks in addition to what came next. Access to healthcare, social determinants of health. What does that mean out here? Well, it means a lot when there's not adequate public transportation, when it's very difficult to navigate some really critical spaces, when the language that you're learning isn't 100% there, and you have a child with special needs, or you have a child with a terminal illness. These are spaces that shouldn't be that hard out here to navigate, and they are. And the growth of our community has not been overnight. You know, we don't have influx. Those buses that person from Riverhead was speaking about, you know, we don't have that. We've got a slow, over the 30, 40 years, gradual growth and change in our demographic. And it's been one of the best things that's happened to us on the East End of Long Island. We've got beautiful, peaceful communities that contribute greatly to this paradise that we get to live in. And we've got friends. We've got Latino valedictorians that are giving non-Latino students someone to compete against for their academic scores. We've got a beautiful community here. And yet, these moments that shift, they shift the ground underneath us, all of us. But what we learned is that mental health number one. We need to make sure we're moving toward that. With Youth Connect, we are now on New York State's budget for our mental health work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what's important about that, which I still have to kind of push against a bit, is folks kind of, oh, but you're doing that for non-Latino kids? I have some school districts that are still kind of like, why not? Are we going to go into a school district that is one school, one community of children and say, you know what, we're just going to help the Latino kids? We're not going to do that because we know what it feels like to have that done to us, to our community. If we have skills and strengths and love and the ability to do what we can do, we offer that to everyone, and that's how you create community, one school at a time. So middle schools and high schools we go into, we offer in Spanish, in English, we'll break out those workshops, and we go into health class, social studies classes, and we work only like 25 kids at a time, no big assembly style things. And we do run and operate a helpline from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week in English and in Spanish. And it is the heart center of OLA. And we are holding space for some really dark things. Sometimes they're not so dark, but you don't know what can turn dark if someone's not out there to listen to you. And I do say listen, because that's oftentimes what our youth really need. They don't need us to tell them what to do to solve their problems. They just need someone to listen openly, without judgment, and to be there for them. And we're there for them. And we're there for kids that have money, that have therapists. We're there for kids that don't speak Spanish, that do speak Spanish. We are there for anyone that's texting us. And it's very, very important for us to maintain that. So we've got about 7 people on our Youth Connect team. We also, as a result of 2016 to 2020, leaned very hard into immigration access, immigration legal support. It didn't exist out here. There are a couple of great lawyers. Very hard to get anything that is pro bono, let alone low bono and also reputable. It's difficult. A lot of our community members get siphoned off by really terrible advertising. It's like predatory, brings them all the way out to Queens and takes their money, puts them in deportation proceedings. Yeah, and that happens all the time. So the thing is that we've got members of our community out here that oftentimes have very strong pathways to citizenship, but they are taken on this path of exploitation and taking all the money that they've got, their families have put together. So we knew we had to lean into that. Started talking to the Office of New Americans. How could we get a position released to the east end of Long Island where we could dedicate our time and energy to pro bono work for very low-income families? And so it took, I don't know, Erica Padilla, legal advocate, how long did it take us? How many years? To finally get the immigration team started. 3, 4 years, something like that, yeah. And so we have a board member, Sarah Burr, who is a retired immigration judge. And it was wonderful. She came on board around 2016, 2017. And it was a goal of hers also to help us do that. So we now have Lucia Demarao, who you got to meet there. We also have just hired a second immigration lawyer. These are full-time lawyers that work just for OLA. And Sarah Elena, who's working with us now, is working on a 2-year grant that we have to focus on youth. So this is special immigrant juvenile status. And we are working with youth. We have a 15-person wait list right now. But these are kids that have been here for a while. They're getting ready to time out. At 21, you can't really do much after that. So we have Sarah Elena and Lucia. Erica Padilla is on the immigration team half of the time, and the other half of the time, she heads up our advocacy team that handles work that has just gotten harder and harder before January 20th, related to wage theft. How much money in wage theft are we looking at right now?
We have 72 cases. If we add all that together, it's going to add up like close to $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
But we have recovered 10,000, a little bit more, in 10 cases, and this is without any police intervention or things like that, just with letters.
No rough stuff, okay? Because Erica, she's tough, but she's not doing that. But Erica, we've devised at least giving our community members a chance. So we send out a letter that basically says, hey, you might not be aware of this, but we're learning that maybe there's some wages owed to this person who worked for you. And if we have misinformation, please help us understand. We work with the Department of Labor. Here's the law. Erica recently added in the letter of the law about, is it larceny? Yep. And we let people know this is serious. You don't have people work for you and then not pay them their wages and then threaten them because you could say, hey, well, you're not documented, so what are you going to do about it? Because people do kind of run and hide unless they're lucky enough to have someone tell them about OLA, or we get our word out, which we try to do as much as we can, and then they encounter Erica and our advocacy team, and she gets to tell them their rights. And then they get to decide what they want to do. We don't force anyone to take any particular action, but Erica sends that letter, and right now Erica has recovered about $10,000 just doing that. Someone came to my house and picked up a check for, what is that, $3,000? $2,000. The tough thing is that it's going to get worse. So a lot of stuff we started building and building because of 2016, but we've seen ever since 2020 the backlash. We felt it. We felt it. People would come up to me and say, oh, but it's better now. And it was hard because I want to tell everyone, yeah, it's better. It's all good. Everything's fine. But honestly, it's not. It wasn't. The backlash that we felt, the anger that we felt, it's a current. It's a current. And we're in it. We're swimming in it. We're wading in it all the time. And so the wage stuff started getting higher and higher and higher. Housing exploitation, higher and higher. Of course, COVID cut into some housing, and there, that happened. But the level that you are now going to exploit someone at, that shifted because people felt more and more emboldened to be able to do that. So that you could have a child with microcephaly living in a house, parents are paying the rent, and a landlord does an illegal eviction on them, shuts off the heat, throws their stuff outside. We are having a hard time, and I'm fine that this is going to be on YouTube because, hey, East End Police Departments, all 10 of you, you know I'm talking with you about this. We've got a hard time convincing law enforcement to enforce that law. Since 2019, illegal lockouts are a misdemeanor. No one's going to prison upstate, but if that landlord is now receiving a desk appearance ticket to go talk to a judge about why they locked that family out, then we start having a deterrent. But right now we don't have those deterrents, and our exploitation levels are through the roof. The fear that people are experiencing right now out here, people that you know, children, grandchildren that are playing with your grandchildren or are your grandchildren, are experiencing some really, really rough times right now. And we are in those homes. We're in those rooms that are in the room that are in the room. And we are lucky to work with some law enforcement departments and code enforcement that know when landlords are being exploitive, and they work with us. They're the ones calling us, code enforcement, and saying, this is a terrible situation, Minerva. We know it's the landlord, and then we get the chief involved, and then we're trying to get them into court, because there's a lawful way to evict someone, but it's not by telling them, hey, be out in 10 days or I'm calling immigration. And it used to be in the past, like back in the Farmingville days, or Farmingville or Farmingdale, I always get that wrong. Sorry. Yeah, but the one where that horrible thing happened, that I just watched Carlos Sandoval's film. But those days back in 2001, or Marcelo Lucero, where you could threaten someone you're going to call immigration, but is immigration going to come out here? But they did. 2016, 2020, they did. And then we dipped into this horrible era of administrative warrants, which are right now not the law of the land. Our local law enforcement are not set up to honor administrative warrants, which is warrants that have not been signed by a judge. So that's good, but we want to keep it like that. What we want to do right now, and then I'm going to get to those little pieces of paper, is make sure that we don't have that pall of acid rain just kind of seep into our skin. Because what it starts to do for OLA is then my job becomes, how do I convince people that these are human beings? How do I convince them that this is not a CNN story? That do I have to tell someone another immigration porn story, which is what I call it, for them to care about this family that we're working with, that may have been here now for, 10 years, 20 years? Do I have to make it that bad Or can you look at this family that you've probably been living among or seeing them in town and interacting with them, but now suddenly I have to create their humanity, recreate their humanity. And I find that happens a lot because the pressure that people feel to live in an environment where bad things are happening right here, where raids were happening right here, where unmarked cars were pulling over men on their way to work in the morning and detaining them unlawfully. But guess what? When you get detained and you don't have a lawyer, it doesn't matter how much you know your rights. It doesn't matter for you to say, I have a right to remain silent. They got detained anyway. So we are prepared to do the work that we did then and 10 times more because we have an infrastructure that's set up in a better way now because we have too much knowledge, unfortunately. But I'm going to ask for either support or to share some of the work that you're hearing about and those little pieces of paper that you have. One thing that really kind of buoyed up OLA for sure and our community was how our community was able to connect directly to some of the need that was mattering most at that moment. And that could be a crisis intervention moment where I needed to find someone, and today I won't point you out, but there was someone that came today and said, you know what, I want to do what needs to be done. If you need me to have my house available for a family for a short time, I'm going to be available to that. And I have to tell you, that happened. We helped a family who was targeted by a raid because they never got the piece of mail. But if you don't get the piece of mail, there's a warrant out for your arrest. That was the only reason that ICE was showing up, not because they were rapists and murderers, but because that family didn't show up because they didn't get that piece of mail. Thank God we heard about that raid. We took pictures of that raid. We had people on the streets that would call us or text us and say, Minerva, there's a raid going on. Here's the street, here's the address. And we would document it. Sometimes we would have community members that could just be there to document, not to try to get in the way and get hurt or make it worse, but to document. And then we would verify it and say, no, this raid is happening right now. Hey, Chief of Police, are these your guys? Because half the time the vests just say police, which makes our police look bad when they're not the ones doing it. And we were able to get that family to a home here in Sag Harbor for a while until things kind of calmed down a little bit. And we're still working with that family right now. And the dad, I think, got his work permit. I think he's close to getting he's on his way to getting a green card. And the daughter also. But this is after years. But that's what this community did. And in other ways as well. So we've got a little card that says direct response. When you go to that QR code, there's a Google form. And what it does is kind of list some examples of what you might be called upon to do should you want to do it. There are going to be things that maybe you sign up for. Yeah, I'd like to learn more about direct response. Maybe the thing that we call you about or is not the thing to do. It's okay. Just say maybe next time. It's all right. We're going to be putting together either individuals or groups of people that are comfortable doing certain types of actions. And some of those actions could be driving someone to a doctor's appointment. Some could be going with someone to accompany them to a very difficult school meeting. Because simply having someone that has agency, that speaks English, you don't even have to say anything. Just by being present. Right now, today, I was talking, no, I can't say who I'm talking to, but we are lucky to work with some agencies. But in terms of what happens if you're homeless, if you're in a transitional situation going to school, there's something called the McKinney-Vento Act, and it allows you to be transported to the school that you were attending before this thing happened that maybe displaced you. A fire, an illegal eviction, domestic violence. So you have the right to be bused back to that school within 50 miles. And quite honestly, it's, the 50-mile marker we don't even really hit. But we're dealing with a family right now who is being told by that school district that you don't have access to that. That doesn't apply to you. And they're not letting this mom, who only speaks Spanish, talk to other people in the district. They're telling her, no, the decision's been made. And so, and not only that, it's going to be better for your child to move to this other school because your child's only in 2nd grade. It doesn't really matter. That's not the law, and it's not right, and it's all wrong. But we have 24 school districts. We're the organization trying to build dialogue, understand the protocols and the policies, stand up with our community against things like this as they happen. But when we see these trends, we don't hold all these trends to ourselves. We look to the other agencies that are out there. So the Attorney General's office. And the work that Letitia James is doing is really awesome. And she's going to be a great ally. And we need to keep her as a great ally. We're doing a lot of work at the governor's level. Nothing's easy, but we've got to keep allies where we can keep them. And that work is very important, but direct response could be that. But you simply being there might not feel like a lot. It's everything in the world. Because that district, probably at that moment, is actually going to listen to that mom, is going to bring in an interpreter, is going to actually tell her what the policies are, instead of just doing whatever they think is easiest for them. And it's happening. It's happening a lot. We've got other areas of crime that happen. We want to make sure that everyone can go to law enforcement. That if they're a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime, they can go and report that. And they don't have to be in this sort of substrata of, but what do I do because my family's not fully documented? Well, then we're at the end of civil society. We're done. I mean, it already feels like that sometimes. But here, there's a little bit more power that we have. And I don't mean that we can stand up against maybe some federal law that comes down our way. But anything that we can stand up against, I'm going to tell you, when OLA's putting word out to you, we're not speaking hyperbolically. We're really, really giving you honest-to-God information that you can feel good about. And if you want to test it, test it. But if there's some spaces that are coming that we can say, hey, listen, this is not a law. This, administrative warrant, this is against our Constitution. These are the ways that we can stand up against it. If there's something that's coming our way, we're going to gather those forces together and that information, and we're going to share it. In professional support, that's for folks out here in this room and other places that might be current lawyers, ex-judges, people in the professional spaces, writers, advocates, people that can bring your skill sets, and maybe you're doing that individually, or maybe you're working in a small team, not committees, which I don't want to say, no one needs any more committees. But we're ready to work with people in whatever circles you need to work in where the priority needs are stepping up. So you might have an amazing skill set in one particular area. Please be patient. It might not be in that exact moment, if that's the only space that you want to work in, that I've got a critical need that I can match up there. But that is another example, professional support. And the last one is fundraising events. We do have events that happen. Usually they're cultural events. We only have one fundraising event that we missed last year, but we're going to definitely do it this year because we have so much that we're doing. It is hard to, it's hard. We've got a team, but they're all cranking all the time. And every one of our team members, except for 2 people, are our programs. So our administrative overhead is 10% or less. So that's going to be a helpful way for us, if you're interested, to share those, think about ways that you want to be involved, and then we will be reaching out to you. In terms of what we see coming next, we're going to wait until January. We're not going to get crazy. We have to straddle this space of not freaking people out, and then also being ready for the worst. One thing I'll share briefly is that during the time of deciding that mental health was going to be a way to lean in, was we were giving workshops at CME to bigger groups than this with a panel of lawyers on how to carefully sign your child away temporarily to the only citizen that you know. And in many cases, it was a neighbor, it was a landlord, it was a coworker. Because we had families that had no one else here that were citizens. But they were so afraid, and they had a reason to be afraid, that they would be taken out of their homes without any kind of notice. And they're the sole provider. So it was a heartbreak, because what was happening, we didn't want to give those trainings, but we were learning that people were getting the wrong information. That people were being unscrupulous and saying, well, pay me so-and-so, and I'll tell you what you need to do. And people were signing over permanent. Now, thankfully, for most of the folks, they didn't have to deal with that. It didn't come to pass for the people that we worked with, but that's what they were ready to do. And in the ways that we can support, and the ways that are lawful, the ways that we can stand up if we're seeing something that is unjust, the ways that we can support each other through this, because we're all feeling it. We're all of us losing sleep. And our Latino community members are here to support each other. They're also here to support our non-Latino community members. You know, during COVID, we had Latinos that were going out to the grocery store when nobody wanted to go to the grocery store and dropping food off to the doorstep of people that were not Latino. And then they were texting us the receipt, and then we were paying them by check like 7 days later. I don't even know how it worked, but it worked. Our community stands up and stands in, and everyone in our community really has this heart. But this is going to be powerful, more powerful than it was in 2016, 2020. I think it's going to move faster. I think some of the barriers that were learned about what communities do to stand up against this kind of thing, I think they're going to go to the heart of it. They're going to go to the heart of it. Where are we going to take our feet out from under us? It could be, again, law enforcement. It could be the court systems, where it became possible to have a judge hand someone over back to custody, even if the case was dismissed because they saw an admin warrant or they had an agreement. I mean, things were going on that shouldn't go on. Because of that, also, we've got Erica Padilla in court every single Monday in landlord-tenant to not just monitor, but to be there to support. And now we have great relationships with the judges in East Hampton. We've got Wally in Riverhead Court every Wednesday. We go into Southampton Court and sometimes Southold. It's about making these relationships. Law enforcement is jumping back in there. I mean, we've been doing it all along, but there are going to be more pressures. And it's not that our law enforcement, amazing folks that we have, they don't see their role as protectors and supporters, but there's this sort of linking up that happens where the messages are hard to kind of push against, but then it's our job. And it's our job to really lean into those relationships that we have, because it's not about the politics. One thing I did learn was that I wasn't going to rely on the politics of things. I love having great people that we work with. I love that people are elected now in Thiel's position. He's amazing. I love who we've got coming in, Tommy John. But the pressures are going to be unreal. Our law enforcement, they're going to have pressures, but it's going to be for us to stand up as people who live out here, who care about these things. And we had some pretty significant and very successful petitions that happened. We had legislation that we created. The late Andrew Strong, he was a human rights lawyer, amazing person, who passed away untimely, but he worked with us during that time, closely with Erica. And he was working in Kosovo, prosecuting war crimes. And he came here, and he just was shocked that this is what he was doing now. It was like some of the same work he was doing in Kosovo, interviewing and talking to people that were being unlawfully held, that were being exploited, that were being sexually abused, and he was doing that work here, and he created something called the Peaceful Communities Protection Act. And that was a way for us to try to get our towns and our villages to disconnect themselves in whatever lawful way they could, which they had a lot of ways to do it, from direct relationship with ICE. Or if they really, really had to, because it was a very dangerous situation, be transparent about why. And that they weren't going to adhere to ways that were against our Constitution to perform search and seizures. And we never really got those signed up. So we're going to be ready to lean into other legislation that we can do, and we can work on preemptively. But that's where I'm talking about professional support. People that have some background in that can help shepherd some of these things forward. Because we have, in our advocacy team, we have Erica, Emily, Wally, Alma, and me. And that's us. But we get to work with the Department of Labor. We get to work with other lawyers and other people that help kind of support and guide us in certain ways. But really, that's our team. And we have Healthy East End, which leans into physical health, access to health care, driving people to doctor's appointments, working with children who are terminally ill, driving cancer patients to their treatments. And not all Latino. Again, we're leaning in wherever we can, but we need that support. We've got our Youth Connect team that you saw. So if you've got mental health backgrounds, we are currently now applying for a New York State waiver so that we can take our mental health work up to another level. so that we can do ongoing therapy with families, because we're working with teens, but half the time it's a family dynamic that might be kind of broken. Like, we all grew up with some level of dysfunction, I'm sure. But if we can have therapists that we can have dedicated to that on a weekly basis, that are bilingual and bicultural across the entire East End, we're stepping into a gap that no one's filling it. Family Service League is doing some work, but they're not filling it. And they're like a $36 million organization. OLA right now, it runs at about $2 million. And so we're leaning in spaces because we have to. And we're going to hold the space until we can do better, until other people can step in, or until we just keep growing, whatever it's going to take. But those are some of our teams and the work that we're doing. What time is it right now? I do want to check a time. Is it? Sorry. It's 5 to 7? 12 to 7. Okay, good. A couple more minutes. But before I do anything else, I want to stop and I want to see if, so we went over the main teams that we have, immigration. Any questions that you have right now about any of the work? Yes, April.
I was just wondering, in terms of communicating to the people that you're helping, is there any common denominator for communication? Like I was thinking of Tu Prensa or something like that. Do people read? Do most Latinos here read Tu Prensa? And were you to do a series of articles about basic rights, basic scams that people should avoid? It's so horrifying to hear you talk about people going to an unscrupulous office for help, posing as lawyers, taking their money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If there were a way of doing like a series of articles or something like that that could communicate that to, but maybe this isn't even possible.
No. Let me jump in because you're right on target. So Maria del Mar Piedra Buena and Juliana Holguin are the two publishers of Tu Prensa Local. It is one of the best. They're both journalists, one from Spain, one from Colombia. One of the only daily that we have that is in Spanish only. It is electronic. It is absolutely widely read, and we have been doing nonstop series with them since they started. So any chance that we can to actually write them into our grants, we do. So we write them into our grants so that we're not, because there are only 2 of them, and it can't be like, get this article out. Article, can you help with this? Can you help with that? One example is, I didn't show the image, but they partnered with us on a panel that it's on our YouTube channel. We have it in English and Spanish on some terrible practices. They're not the right practices for dealing with child victims of sexual assault. From the very moment that it's reported or known, to the moment that the child is dealing with law enforcement, the moment the child's dealing with the DA, what's happening with the parents. Much worse if you're from an immigrant family or your English is not 100% there. So we partnered on that panel, but we did a series of laws that we put out there, a series of rights, and even a panel. And we also do a lot with video as well, because a lot of our community members, they certainly read Tu Prensa, but having certain videos or live webinars. Live webinars have been a way for us to put things out through our Zoom and also live on Facebook. So Erica Padilla has done a lot of live webinars on some of these different scams, knowing your rights, different rights, on housing, illegal eviction, access to public education, in terms of where do you live. I'm not going to say that every time this happens, it's out of malice, and not just because it's on YouTube, but because it just happens too much. We've got too many ways that a family can get the wrong information and suddenly they're not registering their child for school because they believe incorrectly that they have to have an affidavit from the landlord, a lease from the landlord, an electric bill. They don't have to have any of those things. New York State Ed and the Attorney General's office has guided for many years now. You could have a third-party affidavit. I could go to your home, check it out, see that the child is living there, and I'll do a sworn oath. I'll get in trouble if I'm lying, and I will not lie. That child is living there. You're living there. The child's in the district. But they're not told that oftentimes. So there's certain ways that a chilling of enrollment can happen, and that is against the law. So we are involved in whatever we can be in that. Also, the way that sometimes families are investigated. If someone feels that someone's not living in the district lawfully, schools are allowed to investigate, but it's kind of how you do it is what matters. And that you don't just jump to that situation where there's a strange man coming to the door of a mom and a daughter just because maybe someone heard that maybe that family was going to be moving soon. That's not okay. Make a phone call. Hey, you moving? No? Okay, great, thanks. That child was in the school for 2 years, and that's something, some rumor precipitated this stranger, because they didn't know this man, coming to the home. So all of these things, all of these rights, and all of these trends that we see as they happen, partners like Tu Prensa Local, hugely important. Also Fiesta Radio, for us, we work with them a lot. There's a new show called In Vivo. They operate of they have their studio in Ronkonkoma, but we'll either go out there or do live webinars on Zoom. That's a huge way of getting that information out. We also go church to church to church to church. There was a picture I didn't show, but early on in 2016-17, we called a meeting with a couple of lawyers that we knew. At that point, we didn't have our own lawyers, to the big the basilica in Southampton. No, in Southampton. Sacred Hearts, yeah. And we had, I think, about 700 people lining the walls, in the aisles, on every single seat, because they were petrified. And the churches and the Spanish language masses are a very important way that we stay engaged. And not just in these horrible times, but also when we have programming that we're doing for elderly. We've been doing a lot of work for elderly, Spanish-speaking elderly, to avoid falling. We're working with Stony Brook on that. Because all of the members of our community, everyone matters, and at the same time, there's so many ways that our existing offerings that are thriving. Southampton has buses that can drive elderly folks to the doctor or to CVS or to the grocery store even. But there are so many members of our community that are Latino, that might not speak English perfectly, that don't know anything about this, and we're trying to connect those dots. We're trying to work with our municipalities to kind of amp that up it a little bit. They're fully eligible. They're 70 years old. 80 years old. So when we did this, we did some Tai Chi in Spanish. We did an evidence-based training called A Matter of Balance to go over all kinds of ways to make sure that you have strategy so that you're not falling down. And we had 89-year-old folks in this class that we were doing. They didn't have any idea of what the towns were offering. So it's a lot of work that we're doing, but they all kind of fall. I used to talk like this, and people were like, oh, she's like all over the map. But what ended up happening is that now we see all these buckets. It's Healthy East End. It is our mental health. It is immigration. It is advocacy. It is the arts, because we have to celebrate. We can't be doing all this and forget what we're protecting and what we're celebrating. And I'll end with something kind of, I don't know, because I'm in this beautiful art space, and I love being here, is that we are going to be doing a production, the first ever Spanish language only theater production. We're going to be doing it at Guildhall, and it's going to be of Fuente Ovejuna, which is a 16th century play written by Lope de Vega. And when you read it, it reads like it was written yesterday or on election day. Abuses of power, women standing up against rape and gender violence. It is a powerful play, and we're going to be doing it in Spanish only with local community folks that are some with experience and some not, but it's going to be beautiful. And that's going to open not until May 2025, but we have time. But the whole reason to do it now is to have a space, a creative space, to have dialogue during these very difficult times, so that as we devise this work together with our community, that there's a level of agency and connection that you can have to what is real, what really matters. No, I'm not losing my mind. I'm not being looked at as a human being. It does hurt. But the question that you had, April, yes, and any other ways, there could be some other means of getting the word out there. I'm a little hesitant about, even though I'd like to get the word out in a bigger way, Univision or Telemundo, but some of the leadership around there is a little scary at the moment, but maybe that's changing. So we're open, but yes. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Nada. Sure, I'll share a little bit. I'll be brief with it, but I was born in Manhattan to a Puerto Rican father who I never knew, and my mother who was mentally ill, and so I was taken in by my grandparents. My mother and I were, and I was raised in Miami around so many Latina mentors. So it wasn't so much my Puerto Rican roots with a father that I never knew. It was the Chilean teacher that I had. It was the Colombian mother, the Cuban mother of the Cuban boy that I was dating for 5 years. Everyone around me were these strong Latina women, and it had an impact on me. And then I ended up going to NYU to get out of Miami, because I love Miami, but I'm kind of for theater. So I went to Tisch for theater, and I stayed doing that for a while, started a theater company in the city, in the West Beth complex there. We had a theater called Lost Tribe Theater at the Bank Street Theater, was our space, and did that for about 8 years. 5 years there, and before that kind of traveling. But all the work was always a sort of socially relevant work, but good theater, not just soapbox, obnoxious theater. It was like really good theater. But it became very mercenary. It was hard to get audiences. It was hard to attract the press. And eventually, through a few different reasons, one of which was divorce, ended up in the East End of Long Island, and kind of starting my life over again as a single mom, and trying to understand what this weird community was. Took about 5 years to find some real connection to friends and to community. One of my first connection points was Guildhall. Got involved with Cherry Orchard, did that play, and found my fun, wild theater people. And little by little, just started understanding what this community was. Found Isabel Sepulveda, one of the founders of OLA, and got very much involved with OLA as a volunteer executive director, while I was a full-time working, doing something else. But it was really impactful to me. And then learned about the retreat, and that work defined me. Domestic violence and seeing the strength in the families that came through the shelter and the children defined me in so many ways. But what's great about the work with OLA now is that that doesn't go away. That domestic violence work is so important to the work that we bring into OLA, because there's a whole other level of how to work with an immigrant victim of domestic violence. There's so many nuances to that, and we have a lot of them. Our team has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience now over the years. So that's kind of it. So I still get to do theater when I can act, I'd love to. But I'm a co-director of Fuente Vejuna, along with Margarita Espada, who is a beautiful and powerful Puerto Rican theater artist based out of Brentwood and Patchogue. And so she and I are doing this together. And so that's kind of what's happening with that. Yeah? All right, yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And again, I want to thank Erica Vargas, who is executive support, but not only that, she's also doing work programmatically for OLA and supporting so many things. And Erica Padilla, who's our legal advocate, who just keeps the team up and is there anytime our community needs her. Really so thankful that you guys are here, that you both are here. Thank you. Thank you.